Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about uh, project networks, uh, especially the critical path method. Uh, the project networks are the tools used for planning, scheduling and monitoring projects. So in other words, project networks, after they are developed, it can be used for planning, scheduling, and monitoring projects. And the project networks are prepared from the information collected from work breakdown structure, uh, from where you can get the information about the details of activities. So project network is a graphic flowchart which depicts the project activities that must be completed, their logical sequences, and their interdependencies, their start and finishing uh, time, etc. So in order to construct project networks, two building blocks are used, which is the arrow and node. So before we move on to the construction of project network, first you need to understand some of the terminologies. So activity, I think, represents one or more tasks from a work package. Parallel activities refers to those activities that can take place at the same time if the project manager wishes. And path refers to a sequence of connected dependent activities. So on the project network, you will come across parallel activities, path, critical path, and events. So that is why uh, the introduction of terminology is kept. And the critical path refers to that path or paths with the longest duration through the network. If an activity on the path is delayed, then the project is delayed by the same amount of time. So critical path is a path which has the longest duration through the network, and it is named as critical path because uh, if any activity on the critical path is delayed, then the whole project will be delayed by the same amount of time. Then event represents a point in time when activity is either started or completed, and event does not consume time, whereas activity consume time and resources. So an example of an event could be foundation digging started is an event at the beginning of the activity, and after the foundation digging is completed, then another event is foundation digging completed. So in between two consecutive events, activity take place where time and resources are consumed. Now again, before we go on to the construction of uh, critical path method network, CPM network, we need to follow certain basic rules and keep in mind certain basic rules and follow those rules. So when you construct a project network, you should construct in such a way that the network flows from left to right. Okay, so this is very important. When you construct a network, you should lay out your project activities in such a way that it is flowing or maybe moving from left to right. Another rule is that an activity cannot begin until all preceding activities have been completed. So if an activity, for example activity M here, is uh, is to be completed, then all these activities must be completed. If this activity M is to start, then all these three activities J, K, L activities must be completed. So that is what it is talking about here. An activity cannot begin until all preceding activities have been completed. So we have used this example here where activity M is preceded by three activities J, K and L. So if the network is drawn like this, then this means that activity M cannot be started until J is finished, K is finished and L is finished, and all these three activities are finished, then only M can start. That is what it means. So the arrows on the network indicate precedence and flow. Again, using this example here, you can see the arrow originating from activity J and ending at activity M. So this arrow shows the precedence and flow. So the arrowhead here is showing that the uh, work of the project is moving in this direction from J to M. Okay, so you can see this example here. this arrow is starting from A and ending at B. That means the project work is moving from activity A to activity B. After completing activity A, B is started. After B is completed, then C is completed. So like that. So these arrows shows precedence and flow. So this end of the arrow shows precedence, which where you can see that activity A is preceding activity B, and the arrowhead here is showing the flow, where after completing activity A, then you move on to activity B. And similarly, you can see in this activity B is preceding activity C, and activity C can start after completing activity B, where this arrowhead is indicating that activity C, after completing activities B, we can move on to activity C. So this is what it means here. Then another rule is that arrows can cross over each other. You can allow arrows to cross over each other. Each activity should have a unique identification number. Like in this case, you can see there are 3 activities here, and each of these activities have unique identification number denoted by A, B, and C. Not like uh, you have A here and also A here and then B here. So A and A repeating. No. Then these two activities do not have a unique identification number then. Okay. So that is what it means. Then an activity identification number must be larger than that of its preceding activities. So again, you can use this example. There are two activities here, uh, which is happening after this activity here. So you can see the identification number used here is used in these two activities are those letters which are coming after X. Okay, so that way you can consider that these two activities which are following this activity have larger numbers. So if you are using maybe numerals, then maybe 1 here, then 2 here, then 3 here. Not like this. 3 here, 1 here, and 2 here. No. So the identification number for the following activities must be always larger than preceding activities. So in this case, you have Y and Z in these two activities, for these two activities, and X here. Not like you write Z here and then Y and X. No, then it will be wrong. Okay, so that is what it means. Another important rule while constructing a project network is looping. So you should always avoid looping. You should not allow any looping in the project network. Okay, so the looping, the example of looping, looping, example of looping, is it there? No, it is not there. Here you can see there is a looping here. So you are actually uh, first completing the project activity A here, starting from this point to this point, and then this activity B is starting from after completing the project A, and then it is going back to the starting point of project activity A. So this is called looping. So it is going round and round. So it is not moving forward. Okay, so there is no flow from the left to the right in this case. Whereas this in this case it is moving forward. Okay, from here to here. So another basic rule is common start node and end node uh, must be used when there are multiple start and multiple endpoints, or you must use a common start node and end node or finish node when there are more than one activity starting, or when there are more than one activity ending, or when the project is starting with more than one activity, or when the project is finishing with more than one activities. In such case, you must use common start node and common end node or finish node. Okay, so the node start node and end node is being used here because uh, in the previous slide you heard two building blocks or two building blocks used for constructing project network. So the two building blocks that are used for constructing project networks are the arrow and node. So that is why here it is talking about start node and end node. Okay, so now moving further, uh, for constructing critical path method network and program evaluation and review technique network, which are actually written in short as CPM and PERT networks. For constructing that, there are two ways of constructing, and the two different ways of constructing are based on whether you whether a node is used to construct whether a node is used to represent an activity, or whether an arrow is used to represent an activity. Or in other words, two ways of constructing CPM and PERT network depends on whether an activity is represented by a node, which is nothing but a circle or rectangular box, or whether an activity is represented by arrow. So again, why we are talking about node and arrow here is because arrow and node arrows and nodes are used as building blocks for constructing project network or PERT or CPM network. So if the activities of the project are all represented using arrow, uh, using node as activity, then this type of network is called activity on node network. If I tell you once again, if a project network is constructed using node or circle or rectangular box to represent activity, then such network is called activity on node network. If a project network is constructed using uh, arrows representing the activities, various activities, then such a network is called activity on arrow network. So we can see this in the future in the following slides. So you can see some examples of activity on node network. So here uh, activities are represented by node here, the circle here, circle here, circle here. So this one circle here is representing one activity for which the identification code or number being used is A. This is another activity of a project whose identification code is B. This is another activity. This circle is representing another activity, and the identification number given to this activity is C. So if you have three such activities of a project to be performed and their logical sequence is such that for C to start, B must be finished, and for B to start, A must be finished, then the network can be drawn like this, where you can see uh, that activity A precedes activity B and activity B precedes activity C. Or in other words, after completing activity A, we can start activity B, and after completing activity B, we can start activity C. So that is what it means, or that is what this particular network is representing. So if you take another example here, you can see this network is showing the relationship between three activities A, B and C, such that both activity B and C is preceded by activity A, or in other words, for activity B and C to start, activity A must be completed. So if you have such a logical sequence in the activities, then you have to draw the network like this. If you take this example, in this case, project activity, there are 4 activities here and they are related in this manner. So activity C, for activity C to start, both activity A and B must be completed. Okay. For activity D to start, again activity A must be completed and B also must be completed. That is what it means here. In this example, you can see that uh, after completing activity A, you can start activity B and C at the same time. So you can see this activity B and C are parallel activities. Okay. So if you want, or if the project manager wants, this B and C can be started at the same time. So then after completing B and C both, then only activity D can start. So that is what it means, this network. Okay. So there are some more here. Okay. You can see this activity M has 3 preceding activities. After completing all these activities, all these 3 activities only, you can actually start activity M. That is what it means. Okay, so in order to start with the activity on node network, or in order to start constructing activity on node network, first you need to understand this legend, and then you have to use this actually. So I'm saying activity on node network. So that means this particular rectangular box is going to represent activity. Okay, so in this box you can actually provide all the uh, necessary information for each activity. So you can see here ID, which refers to identification number of a given activity. This ES is representing the time, earliest start time. EF is representing earliest finish time. This SL is representing slack, and this LS is representing latest start time. LF is representing latest finish time. And in this cell you can actually write down the description about the particular activity, which is denoted by some number or letter here. Okay, so the number that is reflected here, which represents earliest start time. So this shows this actually shows as to when can this activity start at the earliest, and this earliest finish time represents earliest by when this particular activity can finish. Similarly, this latest start time uh, indicates latest by when this particular activity can start and latest by when this activity can finish. Okay, so this is a node. Okay, and the node that we are using is a rectangular box in which all the details, necessary details are provided within each cell. Okay, so we will start with one example here. So you can see the description of the activities and the identification number of each activity here. You can see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and the description of each activities are provided here. And in order to uh, start each of these activities, which are the activities that must be completed so that these activities can start, are given in this preceding activity here. Like for example, for to start activity A, it is showing preceding activities as none. That means to start activity A, there is no preceding activity. So this is the first activity. Now to start activity E here, for example, there are two preceding activities here, B and C. So that means activity E can start only after completing B and C. So on and so forth. Okay, so and time duration uh, of all these activities, how much time each of these activities take is given here, time duration. Activity E is taking 5 time units, B is taking 15 time units, H is taking 35 time units. So time units can be days, weeks, months. Okay. So this particular uh, information we will use to construct activity on node network. Okay. So you can see uh, we can start with activity A. So activity A has no preceding activity. So activity A is the first activity. Here you can see. So activity A has no preceding activity. So activity A is the first activity. Then activity B. For activity B to start, A must be completed. That means activity B starts after activity A is completed. So that is why activity B is coming after A here. You can see the arrow showing the precedence and flow. So this end of the arrow is showing the activity A preceding activity B, and the arrowhead here on which this activity B is drawn shows the flow from activity A to B. Okay. Then activities, moving on to another activity C. So again, for activity C to start, A must be completed, or in other words, activity C can start after completing activity A. So that is why activity C is drawn here after activity A with an arrow here. Okay, so similarly activity D, for activity D the preceding activity is activity A. That means activity D can start after completing activity A. So again see, this activity D is happening after activity A is completed here. Okay, so D is preceded by A here. You can see, the other end of the arrow is showing the precedence. Okay, so D is preceded by A, or A is followed by D here, which is showing the flow in this direction. Then activity E can start after B and C are completed. Okay, since in this information it is showing that activity E is preceded by B and C. That means activity E can start after B and C are completed. So we can see this activity E can start after completing B and C. So after completing B, E can start, and after completing C, E can start. So in this case, it means that E has to wait for both B and C to be completed. It's not like, no, E can start after B is finished, and C can finish uh, in parallel to E. So it is not like this. Okay, so this precedence means that precedence of B and C means that E has to wait for both B and C to be completed. Then only E can start. That is what it means. Then activity F, which is commission approval, can start only after completing B, C and D, 3 activities. Okay, or in other words, activity F is preceded by three activities B, C and D. So you can see activity E, F can start after completing B, C and D. That is how you draw the network. Okay, then activity G, the preceding activity for G is F, only one activity. You can see activity G here is preceded by activity F here. Then activity H is preceded by E and G, two activities. Or for H to start, E and G must be finished. So you can see H, the preceding activity for H is E and G here. That means for activity H to start, E and G both must be completed. Okay, so this is a rough network where you do not have all the details that is provided here. That is how you start. Then after that you can draw more better finished network like this with this information. So you can keep all this time that are to be calculated empty, and you can write the identification number and description and duration you can write, but all this information you can keep it without filling, because we have to calculate that. So you can, that is what is being done here. You can see all these cells are kept empty. Only the identification number of each activity, description, durations are written in the respective cells. Please remember. Okay. So after drawing this rough network, then you draw the finished, more finished network. Okay, using this legend. But just fill in the identification cell, description and duration, and keep rest of the cells empty, because we need to calculate the times. Okay, so now we can look at how we can calculate the time. So let us assume that the project uh, can start at time 0. So now uh, activity A starting from time 0 will take its own time of 5 time units, for example 5 days. Activity A will take, for example, 5 days and finish after 5 days here. Okay, so at the earliest, activity A can start at time 0, and because the activity will take time to complete, no, people will have to start working, no, to get the uh, application approval here. First somebody will have to type the letter, then print the letter, then put the dispatch number, then only get the signature from the higher authority. So to do that, it will take time, no? So that is what is here, this activity duration here. So after after the project has started from time 0 and taking its time to complete all these smaller activities of 5 time units, it will finish at the earliest by 5 days, for example, or 5 time units. And these activities, since these three activities, since they are they are preceded by activity A, they cannot start before 5 days, because A would not have finished by then. So these three activities must wait for activity A to be finished or completed, and activity A can finish after 5 time units or 5 days. Okay, so that is why B can start only after 5 days, because B is preceded by A. Again, C can start only after 5 days after completing activity A, because C is also preceded by activity A, and D is also preceded by activity A, and D also must wait for activity A to be completed, which will take 5 days, and after 5 days only D can start. So that is why 5 time units are put here, 5 time units are put here, 5 time units are put here. Okay, and this means that these three activities can start after 5 days or 5 time units. Okay, and after 5 days, then this B will take 15 more days to complete. So then B will finish after 15 plus 5, 20 days, because B itself is going to take 15 days to complete after having waited 5 days for A to complete. So that is why B will finish at the earliest after 15 plus 5, 20 time units or 20 days. Similarly, activity C can finish at the earliest after 10 plus 5 time units, 15 time units, because C can start only after 5 days, and the activity C itself will take 10 time units, and at the earliest it can finish after 10 plus 5, 15 time units or 15 days, for example. Similarly, D can finish at the earliest after 5 plus 5, 10 time units. Okay, so now moving on to E. Activity E cannot start before completing both activity B and C. So you can see that activity E is preceded by activity B and activity C here. Okay, so activity E cannot start after 15 days here because B is not yet completed. Since E is preceded by both B and C, E will have to wait for B to complete, which is taking longer time, 20 time units compared to activity C here, which is taking 15 time units. Okay, so activity E can start only after completing activity B, which is taking longer time, 20 time units, and not activity after completing activity C, which is completing after 15 time units after the project is started. Okay, so that is why activity E can start at the earliest. You can see E as here, at the earliest after 20 time units or 20 days. Okay, similarly F cannot start before all these three activities B, C and D are finished. So that means activity F will have to wait for that activity which has the longest duration to complete. Then only activity F can finish. So that is why earliest start time for F here is 20 time units, because B is taking the longest time, 20 time units, C is taking 15 time units, D is taking 10 time units. Okay, so activity F cannot start after 10 days or 15 days because B will have not finished. B will take 15 more days after completing C. So because this network is showing the precedence of F as B, C and D, and B is taking the longest time, it will have to wait until B is finished. So that is why F can start at the earliest after 20 days only. And then again F is going to take its own time to complete, that is 10 days, after having waited for 20 days after starting the project. After starting the project started, and B has taken 20 days, C has taken 15 days, D has taken 10 days to complete. After having waited for 20 days, F can start, and then it will take 10 more days. So 20 plus 10, 30 days. After 30 days, at the earliest, EF here, earliest finish, at the earliest, after 30 days, F will finish. Then G can start after 30 days of starting of the project, and G will take its own time of 170 days, and then it will finish after 170 plus 30, 200 time units or 200 days. Okay, and F can finish at the earliest after taking its own time of 15 days and after having waited for 20 days. 20 plus 15, 35 days. Again, H is preceded by E and F, so H cannot start until and unless both E and G are finished. So E is finishing after 35 days. It cannot start after H cannot start after 35 days because G has just started. Okay, and G is going to take 200 days or 200 time units, so H will have to wait for 200 time units. Although activity E finish after 35 days, uh, activity H will have to wait for G to finish. So G will finish after 200 days and H can start at the earliest after 200 days. After having waited for 200 days and H itself will take 35 days to complete, then at the earliest it will finish after 200 plus 35 days, 235 days. Okay, and this is the 235 days is the latest earliest finish time, and in order not to delay the project beyond 235 days, we can allow the project to finish latest by 235 days. That means latest finish time we can keep 235 days. If we keep 235 days as the latest finish time for project, then the project will not be delayed. Okay, so the calculation of the earliest times, you can see earliest start and earliest finish. So earliest start, earliest finish, earliest start, earliest finish, earliest start, earliest finish, earliest start, earliest finish. So in this calculation what we have done is we have done the calculation of earliest finish times. Okay, earliest times. Okay, so calculation of earliest times from the first activity here till last activity here is called forward pass. Okay, please remember, forward pass is the process of calculating all the earliest times, earliest start and earliest finish times of all the activities starting from activity A till activity H, the last activity, is called forward pass. Okay, then after having found the latest finish time by which the last activity can finish, we can uh, work backward. We can work backward. We can go backward from activity H towards activity A. Okay, and calculate all the latest times. You can see latest start time and latest finish time. So latest finish time and latest start time, latest finish time, latest start time, latest finish, latest start, and so on. So calculation of latest times starting from the last activity towards the first activity is called backward pass. Okay, so we can start with the backward pass now. So after having decided that the latest finish time is 235 days, in order not to allow the project to delay, then uh, activity H can finish at the latest after 235 days if we allow activity H to start at the latest after 200 days. which we get by subtracting 235 days minus 35 is 200. So this means 200 means that in order not to allow activity H to delay beyond 235 days, it must start latest by 200. So that 200 after 200 days, H will take its own time of 35 time units and finish after 235 days, which is the same 235 days here that you found in the earlier slide. So in order not to delay the start of activity H beyond 200 days, G must finish latest by 200 days. So that is why latest finish time of activity G is 200. So this 200 you bring here. And although activity E can finish after 35 days, which you saw here, 35 days, you can allow activity E to finish after 200 days. If you allow activity E to after 200 days, the activity H can start latest by 200 days, taking its own time of 35 days. It will finish after 235 days, so it will not delay the project. So that is why the latest time for E is 200, not 35. Okay, so for E to finish latest by 200 days, it can start after 185 days. That means 200 minus 15, 185 days. So activity E can actually start at the latest after 185 days instead of 20 days. After 20 days, activity E can actually wait until 185 days, taking its own time of 15 days. It will finish after 200 days, and H can start after 200 days, and it will take 35 days, and it will finish after 235 days, which will not delay the project because here it is 235 days same. Okay, so now this activity F, activity G then can start latest by 30 days, which we get after subtracting 200 minus 170, 30 days. For activity G, it must start after 30 days. So for activity G to start after latest by 35 days, uh, activity F must finish latest by 30 days. So the 30 days value here is put here. Okay, and this activity F uh, can start at the latest after 20 days, which is 30 minus 10, 20. For activity B and C, which is preceding activity E, and also this B, C and D are preceding activity F. So when you calculate backward, you have to consider all the following activities. You can see for B is followed by E and F. So when you calculate activity latest finish time here, you have to consider both these. So when you uh, take the latest finish time here, you must take the smallest one of the uh, following activities. So you have two following activities here, E and F. F has 185 and E has 185, F has 20. So you have to take the smaller one or the smallest one. So smallest among these two are 20, so you have to take 20 here. If you put 185 here as the latest finish time of B, then this activity F will have to wait for 185 days here. So 185 plus 10, 195. Then F will finish only after 195, not after 30. So then 195 plus 170, then it will delay the project activity H, no, G and H. Okay, so that is why the latest finish time of activity B is taken as the smallest one among the following activities, that is 20 here. For activity A, activity C, the following activities are again F and E and F, and from among them the smallest value is 20, not the 185 again here, so that is why 20 is put here, okay, as the latest finish time. So again for activity D, the following activities F and the latest start time by which activity F must start is 20, so D must finish latest by 20 days, so that is why 20 here. Then accordingly you can find out the latest start time for B, which is 20 minus 15, 5, 20 minus 10, 10, 20 minus 5, 15 here. And again similarly for activity A, B, C and D are preceding, so when you take the latest finish time here, from among them you have to take the smallest one. Here you can see B has the smallest latest start time, C has 10 and D has 15, so you cannot put 10 here or 15 here, you have to put 5 here, which is the smallest amongst the three. So if you put 10 here, then this activity this particular activity B can start only after 10 days, and then 10 plus 15 it will become 25 days, so it will be delayed by 5 days, and this all these following activities will be delayed by 5 days each. So that is why you have to take the smallest. So when you do the backward pass, you have to look at the smallest latest start time and then put as the latest finish time of the preceding activity. When you move in the forward direction, you have to take the largest, as you saw here. For this activity E, so it is preceded by B and C here, so you can see in the latest earliest finish time is 20 and 15 here, and the largest is taken here, okay. So then you can calculate the latest start time of activity A as 5 minus 5, 0, okay. So then this is the completed network diagram, where you have both the earliest finish times and earliest times and latest times filled in. So all the cells in the box are filled in. So this is the completed project network diagram. Okay, so I will stop here. I think it is becoming very long.